The economic crisis in Germany and other countries in 1922, post-World War I Germany, under the newly established Weimar Republic, faced significant pressure due to the heavy reparations demanded by the war's victors. This, combined with internal efforts to stimulate the economy and the French occupation of the country's most powerful industrial centers, left the government with few options other than to print more money to keep the economy afloat. This excessive printing, combined with reckless lending and reduced productive capacity, led to a collapse in the value of the German mark, to the point where banknotes were more useful as fuel than as currency. Hungary, 1945 Hungary, devastated by the aftermath of World War II, saw more than half of its factories and businesses destroyed, drastically reducing its ability to provide a stable standard of living for its population. The government had no choice but to pump more money through private banks to issue loans to businesses to rebuild from scratch. This reckless creation of money, combined with reckless lending and reduced productive capacity, saw the value of the Hungarian pengo collapse to the point where prices doubled every 15 hours. Yugoslavia, 1992. The collapse of the Soviet Union and ongoing conflicts in Croatia and Bosnia reduced Yugoslavia's industrial capacity. This slowdown in production was accelerated by a trade embargo imposed by the United Nations. To combat this, the government turned on the money printers and made it much easier to borrow. You can guess what happened next. Zimbabwe, 2007. A series of ill-conceived policies led to a mass exodus of capital from the nation, causing the exchange rate of the Zimbabwean dollar to plummet. This made the importation of agricultural supplies like fertilizers and equipment extremely expensive, which in turn paralyzed the nation's production. Combined with the infamous Land Reform Act, the government had few options other than to try to print its way out of trouble, unsuccessfully. North Korea, 2009. North Korea's agricultural production was hit by sanctions and a bad year for the climate. The printing of money and hyperinflation followed. Venezuela, 2016. Ongoing political instability combined with international sanctions left the government with no choice but to print money in an attempt to maintain generous standards of living. This reckless creation of money, combined with a massive reduction in production, led to hyperinflation. Common trends in hyperinflation. In all these examples, which are just a selection from the last century, there are some very evident common trends. Some destabilizing event, whether it be a war, natural disaster, or piece of policy, leads to a sharp decline in productive capacity, which is then corrected with stimulus measures financed by money printing. Unfortunately, almost all these examples translate into some form of a failed state. Economic crises are unfortunate realities, but they are predictable. Market crashes might sting some investors and delay the retirement of average people by a few years, but for those with the time horizon and fortitude to maintain a broad portfolio of activities, things usually end well. Hyperinflation in the United States, 2020. The fallout from the coronavirus pandemic hit the United States particularly hard. Over 30 million people were infected, and 500,000 tragically died. The human cost of this ordeal was obviously the most devastating. The pandemic also had an undeniable impact on the economy. Millions of people are still unemployed through no fault of their own. Many small, medium, and even large businesses were forced to shut down permanently. Once stable sectors like tourism, hospitality, in-person retail, and entertainment were almost entirely wiped out. Despite the hope on the horizon that things will return to normal, these sectors will not return to full capacity for a very long time. To combat this massive decline in economic production, the United States printed more than a third of the active money supply in the economy today over the last 12 months. This money printing combined with an increase in private sector lending and a decline in productive capacity due to the global pandemic's devastation. If this series of circumstances sounds familiar, don't worry, because apparently, it will be different for the United States. Perhaps the US is truly a special economy that is so large and influential that it doesn't follow the same rules as these historical accounts, or perhaps not. But to know for sure, we always need to consider some important details when inflation actually starts to become an unsolvable problem in the economy. Protecting against hyperinflation. The traditional response to this would be to hold real assets like precious metals, productive real estate, or even stocks of companies that wouldn't be too heavily influenced by fluctuations in the national currency. New era solutions might include cryptocurrencies, and it's hard to say that this has been bad advice in recent months. However, there is a more direct solution: shorting currency. Shorting currency. If you want to short something like a stock, you borrow that stock from your broker and then sell it immediately in the hope that the price will drop so you can buy back the same stock at a lower price to return it to the broker from whom you originally borrowed it. But how would you do this with money? It's simple. You borrow money and then exchange that money for some underlying asset like, say, a piece of real estate or a stock portfolio in the hope that the money will become less valuable so you can repay it more easily later. Imagine this: you were looking for a new house in Germany in 1920. A nice apartment in Berlin would have probably cost you about 10,000 Papiermarks, pretty expensive at the time, but the nation was on the rise under the control of the new Weimar Republic, so you put down a deposit of 2,000 Papiermarks and borrowed the remaining 8,000 with a fixed-rate mortgage due in full in 2 years. Then hyperinflation gripped the nation. This is obviously causing all sorts of problems for everyday life, but it presents you with an interesting opportunity. You take a single bill from your desk and sell it to a kid playing on the street to get part of his allowance. Then you take your money in bills to the bank and proceed to pay off your 30-year mortgage 2,000 times over. Yes, of course, hyperinflation will cause other problems that will still impact your daily life, but in the end, now you have a place to live for the price of a bill. This is a very extreme and simplistic example, but it demonstrates that a healthy level of debt used to purchase stable assets can be a truly good hedge against inflation. The fact is, even if rich people know this, in an environment where sophisticated investors anticipate inflation, they will try to take on more debt to invest, especially when that debt can be contracted at record low interest rates. Many rich people taking out a lot of money to invest naturally increases demand and therefore the price of those investments, putting even more money into circulation. More money in circulation in an environment where everything is being pulled out as a hedge against inflation ultimately causes inflation. Conclusion: hyperinflation is a complex and devastating economic phenomenon that has historically led to the collapse of economies and significant hardship for populations. While the United States has unique economic advantages, it is not immune to the risks of hyperinflation. Understanding the causes and effects of hyperinflation can help individuals and governments make informed decisions to protect against its devastating consequences. We are interested in discovering your personal experience on the topic. Write it in the comments and feel free to ask any questions. We will be happy to interact. Feel free to leave a comment so that we can improve the content. Your like would be the cherry on top, and click subscribe to stay informed about upcoming publications.